Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Speak On It with your boy R.W. Coolings. Episode 3, the year is 2021. Today, got some information we want to pass on and a legacy that we're going to be talking about. So we're going to get into this. But before we do, get my stuff together. Let's go. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome again, welcome again. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Let's get these out the way. Good morning, Michelle Long. Good morning, appreciate the support. Good morning, Maurice Wigfall. Good morning, bro. Good morning, appreciate the support. Sharon Carroll. Good morning, cuz. Appreciate the support. Eric Zupons. Good morning, appreciate the support. Newly retired Eric Zupons. Appreciate the support, bro. And Brian Hoodie. Good morning, sir. Good morning, appreciate your support. And Gary Burns. Good morning, bro. Appreciate the support. Early mornings, y'all. Early mornings. Let's go ahead and get these formalities out the way. Follow me. rwcoolings.com is the website. You can go there and get all the information you want, all the information you need about the show, what's going on with the show. You can follow the links there for YouTube, Facebook, Spreaker.com. All the links are there. You can go there and get all the information. We're also broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube. I posted a link as well. If you want to come in virtually to add into the show today, feel free. It's open. Call-in number 844-904-2665. That's 844-904-2665. No matter what the situation is, let your voice be heard, but always say what you mean and mean what you say. Trying to adjust these knobs here. This sound like I got a little feedback there. So we got a good show for you today. We're going to get into some things. This show today is a Help Me Understand show. A Help Me Understand weekend. We got Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday weekend, but it's a Help Me Understand weekend because there's some things that I need some clarification on, some things that I'm trying to get an understanding of things that have gone on in the week. So let's go ahead and get this thing started right here. Investigations on the Capitol insurrection, as they say. Question is, did they have help? The biggest question that's going on right now is, did they have help? Did the insurrectionists have help? Did the protesters, rioters, whatever you want to label them, because, depending on who they are and how they look, depends on what label they put on them. But in this instance, the insurrectionists that invaded the Capitol, did they have help? And there's things coming out, where they're saying senators or congressmen or people that actually work there, officers, people who are supposed to be or supposed to have an allegiance to the United States of America. They're saying that some of these folks that you and I, because I'm just going to keep it real, have voted into office, actually helped these insurrectionists invade the Capitol. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Good morning, my sister. Happy birthday to Martin Luther King Jr. I'm pretty sure that's who you're talking about. And not my birthday. Happy birthday, Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Appreciate the support, sis. Appreciate the support. So the insurrectionists, what's going on? Did they have help? And there's also things coming out saying that there was reconnaissance done the day prior with some congressmen or some senators, and they were showing them around and showing them whose offices were where and all that kind of stuff and all that. They're trying to figure out now what was really going on with this. Now, I seen this morning, late last night, that retired Lieutenant General Honore is now going to be assessing Capitol security. He's going to be assessing Capitol security. Now, for y'all that don't know, if you know retired Lieutenant General Honore, if you think back to Katrina, that was the man you seen on there with the, that southern drawl from Louisiana that would be up there, and he was talking. He was very, very blunt, very, very forward about what he had to say and how he had to say it and what he was saying. This is the guy. This is who Nancy Pelosi has put in charge, asked him to do an assessment of Capitol security. Now, I get why we're doing this, but my question is, why now? Why did it take this long for us to get to a point where we're reassessing a federal building that holds all these people, and now we're reassessing what the security environment is or how they do their security in this location after, not before, after the insurrection? See, this is not the proactive way that we do things. Why are we doing it after the fact? It should have been done before the fact, but that's neither here nor there. Retired Lieutenant General, let me make sure I put retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore will be doing an assessment of the security at the Capitol. And at this particular time, right now, if you've seen it on the news, the Capitol looks like a fortress. They got barricades up. They got streets blocked off within blocks of the Capitol. They got all these things in preparation for the inauguration. But a lot of these precautions are coming in that are different than normal because of what happened at the Capitol with this insurrection after the election rally that they had, whatever name they put on it. This is why there's so much security around there. And they have 20,000 National Guard members in DC for the inauguration. Pretty sure everybody's seen on the news, but you got these National Guard members laying around in the Capitol trying to get rest and everything like that. There's questions about whether they have rooms and things like that. Trust me, they have a place to stay. The pictures they're showing is to sensationalize the fact that they're all there. Let's just be real about it. Now, I heard one of the reporters say that the 20,000 National Guard members we have in DC right now is more of a footprint than we've had in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, any of those places you want to think of. This is more than what we've had in those locations during times of war. What does that say about us? What does that say about the ability for these people who decided to storm the Capitol to change the dynamics of what's going on? We haven't seen a change, and I'm just going to put it out there. We haven't seen a change like this security-wise of anything since 9/11. Because before 9/11, if everybody remembers back, because you gotten so used to it, but let me give you a little flashback. After 9/11, you had to go through security at the airport. Back in the day, you could just walk straight to the gate. You could take people to the gate. Can't do that anymore. 9/11 caused a lot of trickle-down effects of how security was done at the airports because of what happened 9/11. You're going to have the same effect when this is over. My prediction, DC, the tourist spot that it is, will not be as open as it used to be after this. All because people did not feel that they got their way in an election in this free country that holds free elections. And this is where we're at right now. When we have 20,000 National Guard members in the nation's capital providing security for an inauguration and for the members of Congress, the Senate, and things like that. In the aftermath of what happened at the Capitol, they've installed metal detectors. Now, this is something that doesn't sit well with me, and I'm trying to get an understanding. They've installed metal detectors for the security of those in the building on a daily basis. However, Republicans, and I hate to use the Democrat-Republican thing, but in this case, you have to use the Republicans on their uproar. They're mad. They're avoiding going through the metal detectors because they're saying it infringes on their rights. It infringes on their rights, but they're there for their security. These are the mentality of some people who consider themselves to be Republicans, and they're mad because they have to go through another stage of security. So then you get into the point of asking the questions, when this insurrection happened, were the Republicans even concerned about their safety during this time? Because if you had people that were showing them where to go, who were giving them plans on how to get to certain people's offices, this metal detectors that they've installed now becomes more of a hindrance for them than a security aspect for them. Why are we at this level where these people that we put in office can pick and choose and be upset because the security of the others, not just them, is at stake? But because they don't feel that they're threatened because they didn't vote against the president and what he was trying to do, and they were trying to overturn the election, they don't feel there's no harm to them. Mind you, and I'm gonna flash back for a minute. Gabby, is it Gabby Gifford? Shot in the head. Scalise, Representative Scalise, shot while they were out practicing softball. Now, these are things that have happened in our history of politicians being shot. We won't talk about assassinations on presidents and things like that. I'm talking about two current things that have happened, and they're concerned and pissed because they got to go through metal detectors to be secure in their building. This is where we are. This is where we are as a nation. This is where our politicians are as feeling entitled, privileged, all the things you can think of that puts people above other folks and looks down upon them. This is where we're at. And these are the people that we're electing in office over and over and over again. Between now and 2 years from now and 4 years from now, we need to do our due diligence, pay attention to who's saying what, when, where, and why, document it, and make sure we don't keep putting these same people in office. Because no matter what anybody says, if there's any semblance of any senator, congressman, or anybody at that Capitol that helped with the insurrection that happened on that day, they should be put in jail and the keys should be thrown away. Because the oath that they take rules against everything if they were a part of it. Just put that out there. Another thing I'm trying to understand. His name is Jake Chansley, 33 years old, AKA Jake Angeli. He's the guy, staunch QAnon guy. He says he's the symbol. You know, the guy that didn't have no shirt on, had the horn hat on, and, you know, had the spear with the flag hanging off. Everybody's seen him on the news. He was standing up in the speaker's box in the chambers and all that kind of stuff. Well, he was finally arrested. He went to trial. He went in front of the judge the other day. When he went in front of the judge the other day, his mother, God bless mothers, God bless mothers. We all have mothers, but God bless them all. His mother came to court and she told the judge that her son hasn't eaten since he was put into jail because he can only eat, watch this now, he can only eat an organic. He's an organic eating lifestyle. He can't eat regular food. It's got to be organic. That's all he can eat. His mom came there and through the lawyer relayed to the judge that there's a problem with him not being able to eat and he may starve because he only eats organic, and they don't serve that in jail. Listen to what I'm telling you now. The judge told the lawyer to get with the jail where he's being held and have them come up with a menu for him that is organic so he is able to eat. This person is an insurrectionist who went into the Capitol with no regard for human life, causing chaos against our government, homegrown domestic terrorist, and we're giving him organic food while he's in jail, waiting for trial to find out how they're going to charge him. While we have millions of people, I don't say millions, thousands and hundreds of thousands of men and women in jail right now, eating bologna sandwiches, eating apples and drinking milk, because that's the meals that they normally give you in a brown paper bag. Not that I know of, but I've been there a time or two, you know, but I understand what the meals are. Let's just put it that way. I understand what the meals are. However, there is no way that you can tell me that anybody of color would be able to request through your mother or otherwise an organic meal while you're in jail. It's not gonna happen. So why is this person being given these things in spite of the fact he's in jail because he committed a crime. And from what I understand, you have people in jail when you first go jail, prison, or anything like that, who have to fight and go through a whole process to get the medications that they're prescribed on a daily basis while they were out of jail, before they went into jail and got arrested. But we're giving this person organic meals. Why? You remember? Some will, some won't. Back in the day when people went to jail or went to prison or anything, and they would come out and they were able to get a GED or a college education or a trade like woodworking, body shop, all the different things you can think of. You went into jail, you may have went to prison, you may have went for a crime, but while they were in there, prison and jail was a rehabilitation tool. And it went away from that because they didn't let you get GEDs. They didn't let you get college educated while you were in there. They wanted you to be in there and rot away. And now this person, compared to the many hundreds of thousands who may be serving time, gets a specific meal choice while he's serving time until he finds out when his trial date is and if he's going to be up for bail. Why? He is a homegrown domestic terrorist. I guarantee you, probably shouldn't say it, but I will. The people they arrested for 9/11, helping with 9/11, or the people that were sent to Guantanamo Bay who they practice some religion of Muslim or whatever religion they do, and they may not eat certain things, I guarantee there's no accountability taken into their dietary intake while they're in prison. If somebody can tell me something different, let me know. I just don't get it. White privilege. Thank you, Gary Burns. I didn't want to throw that in there because it's obvious. You know, sometimes the obvious is you don't need to really speak it. You really don't need to speak it, but I appreciate it because sometimes it's so visual, it's so loud that we really don't have to say it with our mouth what we see with our eyes. Privilege. Privilege. Now help me understand this. Officer James Cobell. He is the New York Police Department head of the Equal Opportunity Division. He has wrote hundreds of explicitly racist and white supremacist messages across the internet. He's in charge of the New York Police Department. He is the head of the Equal Opportunity Division. And it's been discovered that he sent all these messages out where he supports white supremacy and all these things and his thoughts. And you remember when it was said by many investigations, or supposed to be investigations, that white supremacy was not infiltrating our police departments the police departments or our FBI or any of those type things. Remember when that report came out and they said that none of this was going on, but now we see things like this, and during this insurrection, we're understanding and realizing that it's deeper than what they wanted to reveal. The man leading, this is what the report said, the man leading the New York Police Department's anti-racism work is an actual white supremacist. I'll use white this time, Gary Burns. White supremacist. This is where we're at. And as much as the more these investigations go on, the more things that are going to be revealed about this insurrection and things that who helped who and who did what during this time. It's going to be a lot of things that are going to come out that a lot of people are going to be unsettled about. And when I say unsettled, I say unsettled because it's going to shake you to your core a little bit, but you won't be shocked. See, shocked means it's something that you would have never thought of. Unsettled means you knew it was there, but you wasn't sure. You wasn't really sure. So the unsettling feeling that we're going to get when some of these things start getting exposed, if they truly put the information out, will be unsettling for some folk. Some folks will say, we already knew. Some folks will say, we already knew. Terrence Collins, great discussion, brother. It's a shame that these actions are overshadowing the history that Senator Harris is making. Better days are coming. Amen. Appreciate the support, bro. And you know, better days are coming. But here's where I guess for me, we have to keep our, you know, I guess we have to keep our expectations to a certain level. And that's because we've always tried and we've always thought that as much progress as we've made, we're coming along where people will be accepting of a lot of things. But it still shows that the acceptance is still not there on certain levels. Now, when you say, you know, better days are coming, yeah, I see better days are coming, but it's the undertones that I'm still concerned about, because the things that we don't know, the things that we're not being told, the things that we're not shown, and these undertones are still going to be there. And as well as we have Joe Biden, Kamala Harris coming into office, a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, what are the things that are going to be able to get done that are going to impact the masses rather than the few? You know, those are the things that I'm concerned about. Those are the things that I worry about. And I wonder, at times, will we get to the point where we're all treated equally? Which is great for my transition. I appreciate that, bro. So on this Help Me Understand Saturday, we're going to transition right now. We're going to get away from all the political and all the stuff going on. We're going to celebrate a little bit. And we're going to start off with Michael King Sr. I know y'all wondering who Michael King Sr. is, and let me break it down to you, because a lot of people didn't know that. I didn't know this. So I'm going to pass the information on to you. Michael King Sr. Is the father and the original name of Martin Luther King Jr. and his father. Martin Luther King Jr. was born 15 January 1929 as Michael King Jr. But let me give you the background on how his name became Martin Luther King Jr. In 1934, Michael King Sr. went on a multinational trip to Rome, Tunisia, Egypt, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Berlin. At the Baptist World Alliance meeting in Berlin, he visited sites associated with the Protestant Reformation leader, Martin Luther. Everybody, if people don't know about Martin Luther, he was one of the big, he was a Protestant leader who, you know, you'd have to read it for yourself, because I really can't explain it. It's something you have to go back and look at yourself. But understand something. Go back and look up Martin Luther. Find out his teaching, his readings, his understanding, and where this was an influence on Michael King Sr. enough to change his name to Martin Luther King Sr. and his son's name the same way. During this time, Michael King Sr. at the time witnessed the rise of Nazism while he was visiting these places. The Baptist World Alliance Conference issued a resolution, and it condemns as a violation of the law of God all racial animosity and every form of oppression or unfair discrimination toward the Jews, toward colored people, or toward subject races in any part of the world. Now, when he went to this alliance, this was like their charter. What I just read was like their charter, and that's what they went by. In August of 1934, he returned home and began referring to himself as Martin Luther King Sr. And that's when he dubbed his son Martin Luther King Jr. He was 5 years old when his name was bestowed upon him. July 23rd, 1957, Michael King Jr., who was Martin Luther King Jr., at the age of 28, altered his birth certificate to say the name Martin Luther King Jr. Now, this was kind of, you know, it jumped out at me because I never heard this. I've never read this. It's something we never really hear when people talk about Martin Luther King Jr. But to know that his father seen something in the teachings of Martin Luther that he was willing to change his government-given name to Martin Luther King Sr. and his son's name. So when you think about that name, the prominence of that name, Martin Luther King Jr., Michael King Jr. Just something to think about, something to ponder. It's amazing to me how fate and your destiny you're predestined for greatness, depending on where you stand, depending on where you sit and how people see you. Martin Luther King Jr., the name we know, the name we've always revered and heard about, is a name that didn't always stand at that point to be recognized as who he is. Amazing to me. Amazing to me. Martin Luther King Jr. Got my notes here. Hold on, y'all. I'm jumping around today because I'm going to get into something in a few. This is really going to open your eyes to some things. Martin Luther King Jr., everybody knows the legacy. Everybody knows what he stands for. And we're going to get into something a little bit later. But right now, let me just break some things down to you about Martin Luther King that you may not know. You may know. He entered college at 15 years old, skipped grades 9 and 12. He enrolled at Morehouse College in 1944. He was ordained before he graduated with a degree in sociology. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went to jail 29 times. He was imprisoned, jailed 29 times, and the charges were anything from civil disobedience and many trumped up charges. One was as simple as doing 30 in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. MLK's mother, well, I don't like to use the initials, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his mother, 69-year-old Alberta Williams King, was shot inside Ebenezer Baptist Church. Marcus Wayne Chenault Jr. rose from the front pew with 2 pistols and began shooting. His target was Martin Luther King Sr. But he said after he shot his wife, Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother, Alberta Williams King, that the father was too far away. So he chose her because she was closer. This was his justification or his reasoning behind him shooting her rather than shooting the father who was the target. She was shot and killed from this Wayne Chenault Jr., Marcus Wayne Chenault Jr. in Ebenezer Church at 69 years old. So Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is not and was not immune to the violence that went on around us, to us, during his marches, his protests, and the different things that went on. To see, and he was in the church when his mother was slain. To see that happen, I'm pretty sure it kind of hardened his heart towards the justices. Now, I'm not speaking for him. I'm just telling you something that I would feel that would affect you if you see your mother gunned down like that, knowing that your father was the target. It really makes you think the hatred that people feel towards someone, not because of who they are, just because of how they look and how different they may be and the color of their melanin, the content of their melanin, let me put it that way. At this time, George Washington and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. are the only people to have their birthdays observed as national holidays. The only people, George Washington and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That's just a little synopsis. Everybody knows who Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is, but let me transition. I just mentioned about the 29 times he went to jail for, civil disobedience, and these were all during protest times when he was marching and trying to get equal rights for everyone. And I think that falls on deaf ears when I say that, but it was equal rights for everyone, because what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was pushing for and marching for and protesting about was not only for people of color, but women. It was the Civil Rights Act is what came out of this, but this is what he was pushing for everyone. When we get caught up sometimes and people get caught up that he was only marching for people of color, that's not a true statement. He was looking out for the masses. The things impacted the masses. He did not have tunnel vision on only us. Yes, him being treated the way he was and seeing the way we were treated in our own community sparked him to do what he did. But it wasn't all rosy, wasn't all easy. Gary Burns, peaceful protest. Yes, I need to put that in there. Peaceful protest. Let me get that right. Peaceful protest. And here's the thing. Thank you, Gary Burns. You just sparked something in my mind. When we say peaceful protest, when you think back to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the marches, Selma, all the different things you can think of that are associated with the movement at that time. Peaceful protest. If you watch documentaries, if you've seen videos and everything, they were peaceful protests until what we call law enforcement got involved, water hoses, dogs, nightsticks, all the things that you've seen, all the things that they've experienced of being beaten and things, only because they were marching for justice and freedom. What was a peaceful protest became unpeaceful, non-peaceful, only because law enforcement, so-called, that was in charge at that time chose to make those protests unpeaceful by beating, sickening dogs, the water hoses, all those things we've seen, all those things we know through history that have happened. And then I asked this question the other day, and I'm gonna transition right here for a minute. And I made this statement the other day to somebody, and it still stands true to me anyway, from my observations. When we talk about the protest the other day on the Capitol, I mean, on the grounds down there where we talked about the noose in the middle of the mall in the nation's capital, and the president speaking at this event, and nobody had found a problem with that structure being erected. But if you look around and you see the videos of the protests when, Rudy Giuliani and Don Jr. and those people were speaking before they decided to go to the Capitol, it jumped out at me that I didn't see any police out there with dogs. I didn't see any horseback police. I didn't see any armored tanks. I didn't see any armored personnel carriers. I didn't see people with riot gear on. I didn't see any of this. And I know I'm rehashing what I talked about last week, but I'm just putting it out here that I didn't see any of this at that protest. And it goes back to what Gary Burns said with the privilege, white privilege. Because something that I know to be true, and I think we've all seen it, whenever you see a protest or a demonstration or something goes on, even when you see the guys after somebody won a championship and they're out there in the streets partying and parading and whatever they're doing, you see horseback policemen. They put them out there for the simple fact they can see above the crowd. They can see what's going on further because they're above on horseback. You didn't see any of this doing what happened in the nation's capital. Why? Why? You didn't see any of the normal procedures taken into account at this protest. Why? You look at history, you look at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the protests he did, and you've seen all these things were accessible and available to law enforcement to keep under control what we were marching about, what we were protesting. But on the nation's capital on this day, you've seen none of those things available, none of those things were visible, none of those things were there. But we always reckon back to we've come a long way. We've come a long way. And as my brother said so eloquently, said, better days are coming. But we've been saying better days are coming for years, decades, over and over and over again. And we always say we're going to get there one day. The famous I have a dream speech. You can go back and read it over and over again and wonder when he spoke those words, where we were and where we're at now, and how far have we come? One step, two step, miles? How far? And how far do we still have to go? These are the things that we see and we take in, and then we talk about our experiences of what we see, these disproportionate things because of race and all these things, and they tell you not to talk about race. They tell you everything is not based around race. But when you see these things visually and you've experienced them and you've lived them, The only thing you can resort it to is race, because we bleed the same, we walk the same, everything in our bodies functions the same way. But when you treat me differently than someone that doesn't look like me or has the same melanin content, it can only be because of race. They don't ask you where you live. They don't ask you what your profession is. They know none of that. The only thing they know is how you look and what your melanin content is compared to somebody else. But then when you talk about race, the discussion goes from a discussion to an argument. And the argument comes in of, why do we always talk about race when these things come up? Because race is the undertone that's always there that people don't want to address. And until we get to the point where we address it, sit down and talk about it, no, it's not going to get fixed, but we'll have some understanding maybe in my lifetime. But the things we see, the things we watch, all the things we hear are based on race relations. But the race relations that we need to have never get to a discussion point. Why? Because people don't want to talk about the things that have been done by people that look like them to people that look like me. It's cut and dry. It's cut and dry. Case in point, as I transition, the FBI and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. At the FBI Academy today, at the reflecting pool, there's a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it says, "The time is always right to do what is right." The time is always right to do what is right. This is at the FBI Academy's reflecting pool. It's stenciled on big marble, for all to see. But in the 60s, under J. Edgar Hoover, he did everything in his power to dismantle the teachings and the work of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He had too much influence. They wanted to stop it. This same FBI organization that has his quote on those marble walls at the reflecting pool are the same people who tried to stop everything that he was trying to do. And we look at that and we say, oh, that's a great tribute to the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was identified as the most dangerous Negro in the country by the FBI. The FBI took steps to infiltrate his inner circle because of his influence. They started surveilling him after discovering his association with a man called Stanley Levinson, who was a progressive businessman with Communist Party ties. This is when it really started getting deep. When they found out he had ties to Mr. Stanley Levinson, that's when the FBI started digging even deeper. That's when they started infiltrating. That's when they started recording, wiretapping, all the things we hear about and all the things we see. All these things were done by the FBI organization, where they have his quote in front of a reflecting pool at their academy. Okay. Once he gave his I Have a Dream speech in 1963 and received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, J. Edgar Hoover kicked his espionage of Dr. King into high gear. If anybody knows anything about the I Have a Dream speech, when they seen all those people react the way they did to that, they kicked it into high gear that we need to do something to stop him. This is our FBI of the United States. Federal Bureau of Investigation. All the surveillance tapes are sealed in the National Archives. And this is the part that jumped out at me, and I think everybody needs to understand this. The federal judge ordered these archives sealed. All the tapes, all the surveillance, everything that dealt with what they were doing with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at that time is sealed and cannot be unsealed until at least 2027. So all the surveillance videos, tapes, papers, written papers, anything that dealt with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has been sealed and cannot be sealed until at least 2027. That's 6 years from now. But go back to how long they were surveilling him. This was back in 1963. And they've sealed it. And they don't want it to come out. Why? Ask yourself why. They're saying that ethical questions, they're asking ethically whether these things should be released, and should Dr. King's invasion of privacy be dissected again? Should his invasion of privacy be dissected again? Because, you know, in these tapes, they're saying there's things about him having extramarital affairs and all these things. So they say they don't know if they want to release this because they don't want to stain the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I think personally that a lot of us have no problem overlooking any indiscretions or infidelities that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. may have had. Because the question I have is, if that's what you're concerned about, that was the thing between him and Miss Coretta. But for the government to tell me that the reason they don't want to, release these tapes, all this information is because they're concerned about doing a disservice to his legacy and things like that. No, it has to do with the fact of you don't want people to know what extent you went to stop what he was trying to do. And by releasing these tapes, it puts a black eye on the FBI to show that the FBI does things by choice to whoever they want to do it to. And Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they went so far in depth that they got to hide the things that they had. Because I'm going to go out on a limb and say a lot of the things that they probably have on tape and everything were nothing that could associate with him doing any crimes or anything like that. Normal, everyday conversations about how we were going to make it forward. But they don't want to release that. They don't want to release that. And then there's a question about taking the documents at face value due to racial biases, ingrained racial biases in the FBI during that time. Release them. Let the people judge. Release them and let the people judge for themselves. This is the relationship that our FBI had with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And some of you will probably say, why does he keep just, catching himself Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Because I personally, and this is just me, have a problem when we minimize Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy to initials. I have a problem when they just say MLK. I don't think someone with that stature, with that much of what he did, his legacy, should be minimized to initials of his name. Yes, it's easy to do, but why do we do it? Why do we minimize the greatness of this man to his initials? Brian Hoodie, my father-in-law, always said, let your good outweigh your bad. Amen. We all fall short in the flesh. We all fall short in the flesh. But when you talk about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and all the good that he's done, and you don't want to release tapes because you're worried about people judging him differently, because he may, not that he did, but he may have had an extramarital affair or something like that, and you choose not to release it because you don't want people to look down, is say what you want. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Because if it was that serious, it would have came out a long time ago about these indiscretions that he had. But you never hear about those indiscretions until they talk about releasing the tapes and the videos and everything that they had on him. Back to my other point as we transition, when I talked about the initials. In my opinion, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy has been hijacked. It has been hijacked. It has been hijacked and minimized to quotes and excerpts from speeches. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy has been minimized to quotes, as I mentioned at the FBI headquarters, and speeches, excerpts from speeches, not the full context of the speech, but certain parts of the speech. Because if they play the full speech, you will get the full understanding of what he was fighting for at the time when he was giving the speech. It calls out the racism and the injustices. All these things are in his speeches, but they only pick and choose certain excerpts from the speeches to let you know what he was talking about. And then let's just touch on a few. Nonviolence, nonviolence. What's the concept of it? What was the context of what he was saying when he said nonviolence, nonviolence? Hate cannot drive out hate. These are small things that we hear all the time. People will throw out there, but they never give you the context and what it was used for. But they'll say, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, hate cannot drive out hate. Wait. And what did he say after that? What did he say before that? Give me everything. Don't just give me. It's like going to order a burger and they only give you a pickle. The pickles are part of the burger. Judge us by the content of our character. You know how, everyone uses that, the judging of the content of the character, but they don't give you the full context of what was being said about that in his speech. Poverty and racism are their only evils. Whose? I've been to the mountaintop. Oh, let's not talk about that one. That is one of the most spoken things out. Well, it's not, no. The second, let me say the second, because the last one is probably the first. But this is one of the most spoken quotes that has been broken down to minimize the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've been to the mountaintop. Or I may not get there with you, or any of that, all those things. And then the main one, I have a dream. I have a dream. And it stops right there. I have a dream that one day my kids, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get in there because I don't want to minimize what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was saying when he did these speeches and what we've minimized down to quotes. We have minimized his legacy to quotes, and we're guilty of it just like the other side. And people forget in 1968, there was a Harris poll done. And Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s disapproval rating was at 75%. His disapproval rating was at 75% in 1968 when a Harris poll was conducted. He was called a socialist. He was called a communist. And those are just two of many things that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was called in his lifetime, because of what he was trying to do, the exposure that he was putting on certain things. And as I mentioned, many pick and choose, but don't practice the concept of Dr. King's speeches. When I think about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I think about the way society as a whole, to include people that look like me, have minimized his legacy down to quotes and parts of speeches and not the full context of what he meant behind it. It eats at me. And I'm trying to get past this and get a better understanding of why we have these senators and congressmen and people like that will get up there, and people in public positions will get up there and they'll say a small quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to try to supplant what they're trying to get across, or to justify that they're not racist, or any of the things you can think about to make it seem like they understand the plight. And then we see these things and the minimalization of the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we ask ourselves, we should be asking ourselves, why have we allowed this to happen? Why have we allowed these people to hijack the legacy of this great man? We've allowed it to happen because we're guilty of it as ourselves. We take small pieces of what Malcolm X, I posted something the other day about Malcolm X, by any means necessary, and all those things. We take these small things from the larger aspect of what they meant when they said what they said. And when we do that, we minimize everything they stood for, everything they stood on, and the legacy that we should be protecting. I'm guilty. Most of you are guilty. We pick and choose the things that we want to harp on that are, consistent with who we are as far as the point we're trying to get across. And the first thing we do is go to these quotes that are a small part of the legacy. I'll give you an example. We're all going to leave this earth one day. And we're all going to have a funeral. Some people will speak at your funeral, some won't. But when they decide to speak at your funeral, do you want them to leave out the most important parts of your lives, of your life, or do you want them to just take bits and pieces and turn it into a quote, and that is what supplants you and your legacy? Because that's what we've done to the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We don't practice what his birthday is about. We don't go out and work in our communities like we should. We don't do the things that he stood for on the day that we celebrate him. A lot of times we don't even celebrate him. I'm guilty. I go to a parade every year if I get the opportunity. I sit there and watch the marching bands go by, but I don't do the work in the community like I should, which is what most of us should be doing. I bring that up today because we have to get back to the basics. We have to get back to the basics of who we are and working within our communities first to make impact and supplant the legacy of those that came before us, for us, and those that will come after us. It's on us to stop allowing the hijacking of the legacy of the great people that are in our history to be minimized to a quote or a small excerpt from a speech that touched on so many different dynamics, and we've allowed them to minimize it to, I have a dream. I've been to the mountaintop. Mind, body, and soul segment, y'all. Mind, body, and soul. In 2021, we're taking it one day at a time. And in this year of taking it one day at a time, we're talking about self-care. And self-care encompasses a whole lot of things that deal with us and bettering ourselves to make us better than we were the day before. This quote here is by Tony Robbins. And this is what it says. The strongest force in the universe is a human being living consistently with his identity. The strongest force in the universe is a human being living consistently with his identity. I found this quote because when we talk about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy and his standing in our community and what he did, I posted something, the other day where I have a picture on my wall in the pool room where he's playing pool with a bunch of kids watching. And it just, when I look at that, I think about when he's out there and he's playing pool with those kids watching, with all that he does, with all that he did, with all the speeches, all the marches, all the things that he was doing to help others. He never lost who he was. He never wavered from who he was. He was consistently himself. In this year, at this time, when we get back to being ourselves, when we talk about our self-care, the only person that can be you better than you is you. When we say, the strongest force in the universe is a human being living consistently with his identity. That means you're in touch with yourself. That means you understand yourself. That means you're trying to be better than you were yesterday, at the same time, never wavering from who you are. When I talk about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X or any of those, Nelson Mandela, we talk about these people, we look at them, we admire them. But the one thing we lose focus of is they were who they were. We accepted them for who they are. And their legacy is built on the fact that they never wavered. No how, no way. We have to get in the mindset of doing that for ourselves and holding ourselves accountable for never wavering who we are, because you cannot be a force in this society, on this earth, as a human living being, wavering from day to day, not understanding who you are and what your mission and purpose is. It cannot happen if you consistently don't stand on the principles and the practices of who you are to the core. Not who you are when you waver because you're talking to this person or you waver because you're hanging with this group. Who are you consistently? You know, I mentioned last week in Mind, Body, and Soul, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. This is telling you, when you present yourself to someone, show them who you truly are and be that person consistently. And don't let anyone minimize who you are because of what they pick and choose to reveal about their interactions with you. If you stay consistent with who you are and how you deal with things, you will be a force to be reckoned with on a daily basis. You may not be out here leading large protests, you may not be out here leading marches, but the fact that the people around you recognize that who you are and what you stand on and what your principles are, you never waver, you never change, you are who you are. You are a force to be reckoned with, because now people see you, they understand you, and you're supplanting your legacy as, this is who I am, this is what I stand on, and until the day I take my last breath, I will not waver to fit into the confines of what you expect me to be, because I'm going to be who I am. And that is the force in this society to be reckoned with. It's that simple. We got to get back to it, y'all. We have to get back to being ourselves and being a force to be reckoned with by being ourselves and not becoming chameleons and trying to fit in to everyone's mold that they think we should be. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. It's a birthday weekend, y'all. It's a birthday weekend. We should be celebrating his legacy as well as doing work in our communities. It's probably a little bit too late, but find something to do. Go read a book about it. Read up on the history. Read up on the things that rather than listen to those excerpts, listen to some of his speeches. Understand what the context of what he was talking about in those speeches, because as much as he was talking about it then, it still stands true today, as we see with the disparities in how people are treated. We have work to do in our own communities. We have work to do within ourselves. But as I mentioned in the Mind, Body, and Soul, in order for us to be a force to be reckoned with, we have to stay consistent in what our identity is and who we are. Because once you show that chink in your armor, they're going to take advantage of anything that they can to minimize who you are. It's just human nature for some folks. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back again next week. Let your friends know, speak on the show, rwcoons.com. They can go to the website. You can also download the show by audio on Spreaker.com or iTunes. Just search Speak on the Show. Appreciate the support. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Continue to follow me on Facebook as well. I'm starting to post more. I'm starting to put articles out there, and I'll be talking about different things as we go. Starting to book guests as well. So probably within the next 2 weeks, we'll have somebody on, but I'm trying to finalize some things. So as I always say before I sign off, love yourself, love one another, keep your head up, and most definitely keep your faith in God. And this weekend, Do not minimize the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King by the initials of his name, but judge him and his work by the content of his character. I love y'all. Keep tuning in. Appreciate you. Peace.